What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the WrestleRant channel. I'm Graham G.S. Matthews. Today we're talking Dark Side of the Ring. Now, here on the channel, we've been doing Dark Side of the Ring reviews for the last 5 years. I've broken down every episode of the first 5 seasons. We now enter episode 1 of season 6. But for the first time ever going forward, these are going to be video reviews here on the channel. They started with a pretty good episode this past Tuesday on Vice TV. The episode all about Mick Foley and his Hell in a Cell match with The Undertaker back at WWE King of the Ring 1998. Now, honestly, I'm not really sure why they started with this episode. Maybe it's going to be a lot tamer than what's to come in the remainder of the season with Tony Atlas, Ludwig Borga coming up next week, Daphne towards the end of the season, Muhammad Hassan. Muhammad Hassan isn't really a tragic tale, like an unfortunate or, surprisingly, shockingly, sad story sort of thing compared to the other stories that will be covered here on the show this season. So maybe that's why they're opening this way and they're ending that way. But I thought overall it was a fine episode. Did I really learn anything I didn't already know? Not really. This was definitely one of those episodes where you go into it already knowing a lot of what they're probably already going to say. Mick Foley being the featured star of this episode. They interview him, his family, among other people that were involved. In the match, Undertaker obviously not being interviewed under a WWE contract, so it makes sense that he wouldn't appear. But they did use excerpts of interviews that he's done in recent years talking about the match. And again, it really isn't anything that we haven't already heard. I even broke down an episode of WWE Untold about the Undertaker, Mick Foley, Hell in a Cell match like 5 or 6 years ago here on the channel. WWE did an episode about that with the two of them on their own network years ago. They had them rewatch the match on WWE's YouTube channel about a year or two ago. So again, nothing new here, but I enjoyed it for what it was. So let's get into it here. I wrote down my notes, kind of the highlights of the episode. Mick Foley opened up the episode talking about how he was bullied growing up and he really liked getting reactions out of people. He remembered being at a party and jumping off like something high inside one of the dorm rooms and landing on top of a pillow, doing a Superfly snuck a splash on top of a pillow. But he drank like red juice or had some sort of red liquid in his mouth. It wasn't actual blood, but he spit it out of his mouth on, the wall or whatever it was upon landing on the pillows and this crash landing. And these girls that were there saw that and said, that is one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen. And Foley knew in that moment, like he wanted to be an entertainer. He liked getting a rise out of people, really more so a reaction out of people and capturing their attention. They don't go into his full life story. It's not really a Mick Foley biography. It's more so just about the match itself. But they're offering some background as to why he is the way that he is, or really the way that he was at the peak of his career. We hear from his kids, Dewey and Noel Foley. I think his other son still works for WWE, if I'm not mistaken. I forgot his name, but I think there's another Foley son that actually works for WWE currently on their creative team, or at least he did at one point. He is not interviewed for the show. But the wife, Colette, is Noelle, who had her own reality series in the WWE Network years ago. Dewey, Kane Dewey, that's where that comes from. They're all interviewed for the show. And they talk about how their dad really wrestled that hardcore style, even before he showed up in WWE. Now, they specifically were not old enough to remember it. Noelle even says later on in the show that she has no recollection of her father ever wrestling growing up. And that she's not denying having seen the matches. She's just saying that there's probably a mental part of her head, specifically for the I Quit Rock match from Royal Rumble 1999, that kind of just compartmentalizes those type of memories and kind of, stows them away because they were so traumatizing for her to kind of realize my dad is getting the shit kicked out of him. And she couldn't really process that as a kid. And she wasn't 2 years old. I mean, she was probably 6, 7, 8 years old. Old enough to remember, but she doesn't remember much about it in retrospect, probably because she didn't want to remember it. That's how traumatizing those memories were. But Foley says that his wife understood the commitment that he had to the business of pro wrestling and kind of going out there and putting his body on the line. We hear from Jim Cornette, who appears on probably a majority of these episodes in the past 6 seasons. He praises Mick Foley's psychology inside the ring. And Jim Ross, or rather, who we also hear from on this episode, Cornette is the first person to call something stupid when he sees it. And he praises the, what's that phrase that Foley uses when he describes his performance in this match? The something testicular fortitude. I think that's the expression that he uses, the phrase, talking about the performance in this match and other matches and performances he's had over the course of his career. It's interesting seeing Cornette praise Foley's stupidity in this match and the fact they allowed it to continue. We don't really hear from him on that front, but more so Foley as a performer and his psychology and stuff like that. But anyway, Jim Ross, who was interviewed for the episode, as I mentioned a moment ago, he had mentioned how Vince he was willing to hire Foley because Jim Ross was really the one who recruited Foley, gave him a shot, gave him that opportunity. Vince said, I'll hire him, but he has to wear a mask, which is where the Mankind character came from when he debuted right after WrestleMania in 1996. Despite already being Cactus Jack and Mick Foley in ECW, among other promotions prior to that point. Cornette said that, it was kind of his idea, I guess, to create the Hell in the Cell. They had already done cage matches in WWE, all these other promotions for decades. But what they had not done was put something on top of the cage. Now, maybe it had been done previously, but on a major stage such as WWE. I guess WWE, according to Cornette, he was kind of the first person to come up with that idea, saying, let's do a cage match, but put a roof on it and not have them leave. I mean, you could brawl on top of it, which is what they did at the very beginning of this match. But, you're not supposed to escape. And if you do, it's supposed to be, a big deal, which it has been in other matches that it's happened in. But anyway, so I guess Terry Funk was talking to Foley, and those two were very close. He was joking with Foley before the match. Wouldn't it be funny if he went to the top to start the match and did a big move off of it, not actually expecting him to take it seriously, probably not realizing who the fuck he was talking to? And Foley was like, you know what, that's actually a good idea. So he credits Terry Funk with coming up with that idea to start the match the way that they did. Foley remembers being very scared while on top of the structure and remembering hearing the panels on top of the cell being held together by fucking zip ties. He can hear the zip ties coming apart. And zip ties are strong, but they're not meant to hold 600 pounds of weight on top of a fucking structure many feet above the ring, many feet above the ground. So the mom, while they're watching the match, I guess the mom is watching with the kids. Why the kids were watching the match and she allowed them to watch the match, I'm not sure. That match specifically, I'm not really sure. But she had to tell the kids it was fake, oh, daddy's not actually hurt, he's okay, when in reality, he really wasn't. They actually interviewed the doctor on site for this match. I didn't write down his name, but he was a French doctor. I guess he was in the fucking Mortal Kombat movie many years ago. Pretty crazy. But he's quite the character, and he remembers tending to Foley many, many times over the course of their respective careers, but specifically during this match. Foley felt like he could continue. After doing, the shit off the top and everything else that he had done at many points during the match, he felt like he could continue, specifically after he fell off. And that's why he kept going. He actually also did not plan, and this was also common knowledge, a lot of this is common knowledge, but he did not plan to fall through the top of the structure. He was hoping that he would take the chokeslam on top from Taker. This is after they already talked about him falling off the side, and I don't really need to get into that. It's kind of, old hat. But as far as going through the top, they were not planning for that. He was hoping they would loosen it by him doing it, and then it would kind of gradually come apart, and then he can maybe fall through. No, he went right the fuck through. He's lucky he didn't die. It was insane. And the mom, Foley's wife, Colette, thought Foley was either dead or done for or whatever. She thought that he was extremely seriously hurt. Obviously, he wasn't, although he was out of it. Terry Funk tried to pivot during the match and tell Taker to punch him and chokeslam him, hit him, so they could take the attention off of Foley for a little bit, which they did. Foley mentioned he recalled barely being able to get back to his feet. Taker tried to talk to him, tell him, hey, let's bring this thing home. Are you okay? And all Foley could say was, I want to get to the tax. I want to get to the tax. He says here this was the first appearance of thumbtacks in WWE. I assume that's true. I can't recall another instance prior to that where they used thumbtacks in a match, but I thought that was interesting. Even if it's not true, that's what Foley said, so I thought that was interesting if true. And the more he kind of rallied back, the more the fans rallied behind him. And that's really what he wanted. He wanted that reaction. So as soon as the match was over, and they go through all the nuts and bolts of the match and every move by move. I kind of just did a general overview. The wife called him screaming. Usually he called her after every match. This was the one time where he didn't call her because he was completely out of it. What they did not talk about when Taker pinned Foley for the win, pinned Mankind, whatever, he kind of kicked his leg up a little bit. I'm surprised he didn't mention that here, but he did that on purpose to show that despite getting the absolute shit kicked out of him, he did that to show the fans that he had the slightest bit of life left in him. And they don't talk about that here, which I was kind of disappointed by. It was a nice little detail. I thought that was cool. But anyway, Vince, as soon as Foley walked back through the curtain, told Foley, "I need you to promise me you will never do anything like that ever again." And Foley remembers that he lost 2 teeth. He shows us that he lost 2 teeth. They talk about the fucking tooth in the nose, which was disgusting, and how it probably went, like he broke a tooth, went through his mouth, and then back through the nose. Because Cornette was talking about how the hell did that even happen? Like, how do you lose a tooth and it ends up in your nose? The doctor had explained maybe that's how it happened, which is also disgusting. But Foley recalls losing 2 teeth, 15 stitches along the bottom lip, I believe, because he had like an open gap or whatever, which was disgusting. A bruised kidney, among many other injuries, obviously. But he wasn't like seriously hurt, because I think he was right back to wrestling like the next night or like soon after. Like, it wasn't like he was gone off of TV for 6 months. He kept going after that, which is insane. But anyway, so they talk about how that really changed the tide of his entire WWE career. He was really like an upper mid-card guy prior to that point in feuds with Taker and Triple H in 97. 6 months after that performance, he won the World Championship, and he does not think that's a coincidence. He won the title from The Rock in early 99, but he also felt like it was kind of a curse because he had to keep living up to being a hardcore legend, which is why he kept doing dumb stuff. Then they transition into, which I'm glad they brought up, the I Quit match with The Rock. It was disgusting to watch back those chair shots right to the fucking head over and over while Foley's hands are handcuffed behind his back. Just disgusting. And Foley even remembers telling The Rock, who was obviously not interviewed for this episode, they were never going to get The Rock on the show. But Foley tells his side of the story and telling Rock to really lay them in. While the wife and the kids are sitting in the front row, by the way. And Noelle's watching this, and she's probably 6 maybe? 4, 5, 6 years old, so maybe young enough where she wouldn't remember, but like I said earlier, she mentions how she probably just took those memories and threw them away. Like, it's not that easy, but like as a kid, she was so traumatized by it that she probably didn't want to remember it. Foley he remembers being told by a neurologist years later, independent of WWE, because WWE's neurologist told him, you probably shouldn't wrestle. And he didn't mention when this was, very likely 2012 though, because he did the Rumble spot in the Royal Rumble 2012. And then he was in the midst of working with Dean Ambrose and that online feud or whatever they were doing. And I guess he was probably told around that point, you should never wrestle again. Not only by WWE's doctors, but by a neurologist independent of WWE's doctors as well. You can never wrestle again. And then he never really did. I mean, he's done some stuff since then, but largely he has not wrestled after that. So he talks about how he does spoken word shows now to kind of get sharper as he gets older because he had a lot of concussions and stuff like that. He just wants to feel accepted. That's kind of like his thing. I don't know if he says those words. It might be coming from his daughter. But he even mentions here from his own mouth, he said that he harbored resentment towards that match, for that Hell in the Cell match, because he felt like it was the only thing he was ever known for. He felt like he accomplished a lot while not really accomplishing anything at all. And Noelle Foley recalls going to the WWE warehouse with her dad, Mick, at some point, I don't know when, probably a few years ago, 10 years ago, whatever, and the cell was there. And Foley went up to it, Mick Foley went up to it, touched the cell, and cried. And she mentions that she had never seen her dad cry before, which was interesting. So it obviously meant enough, and to be traumatized enough by it, or to be emotional towards it, whatever, it obviously was important enough to him. She realized that even in that moment. And he even says here that this was a hell of a line to kind of close on. He mentions, very likely he would not have done anything differently, even if he knew the consequences of what he was doing. Health-wise, longevity-wise, he probably would have done that dumb shit anyway. Even if he knew he would end up in the shape that he's in today and have his career cut short, even a few years later, he probably would have done that dumb shit anyway. And he said that specifically, that performance was one of the most powerful feelings in the world. Just having that control over the audience and making them feel a certain way and whatnot, that was really what his addiction was making those people and fans feel a certain way, and that's why he kept doing it. So again, watching this episode, you won't really learn anything new at all, but if you enjoy that match, want a different perspective about the match, Also from people you probably don't ordinarily hear talk about it. Foley, you've obviously heard talk about it a million times, but like the French Doctor was interesting. You don't hear from like Vince on it, obviously, or Taker, or Terry Funk, who has since passed away, obviously, among other people, because it just wasn't, you just couldn't. We hear from Jimmy Corderas, the referee, who was with the company at the time. I think he was backstage during the match or whatever, or actually tended to Foley at ringside during it. We hear from Jim Ross, which obviously was perfect. But again, it's nothing really new, but I thought as a season opener, I thought it was good. I think this actually aired on Taker's birthday on Tuesday, so maybe that's why they did this one first to kind of get the easy one out of the way. And next week is Ludwig Borga, who I'm pretty sure was like a fucking Nazi in real life. I actually do not know much about his story, so I'm looking forward to not rewatching, but watching that episode coming up on Vice TV this Tuesday. So thank you guys for checking out my review of this episode, the Mick Foley Hell in a Cell edition of Dark Side of the Ring Season 6, Episode 1. We'll be right back here on the channel next week with another video review of Dark Side of the Ring on Ludwig Borga, which I'm looking forward to, for better or for worse. Until next time, guys, be sure to like the video. All that support is greatly appreciated. Subscribe for more daily content here on the channel, and hit the bell button to be notified every single time a new video goes up, and every single time we go live here on the channel. Until next time, folks, I'm Graham G.S. Matthews. Have a great weekend, and I'll catch your ass down the road.